Namaste. Psychoanalysis and philosophy, the anchor. In psychoanalysis, the concept of anchor is referred to in tangent, but not accepted as a technical concept. Let us discuss this interesting topic, perhaps the concept of future with our psychoanalysis consultant, Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, Mr. Vaidya.
Namaste.
Mr. Vaidya, can we start with this concept of the anchor in psychoanalysis?
The meaning of the word anchor in general is very variable. There are many meanings of the word anchor. The first image that comes to mind is the anchor of a ship, that which prevents a ship by being dragged away by the uncontrollable currents of the ocean, that which helps you to survive by holding you. So this is one meaning of the word anchor. The second meaning, when we come to psychoanalysis, we come to Freud's meaning of the primary narcissism and the oceanic experience, where one feels a oneness and from there something emerges, and that stratum from which it emerges becomes like the anchor to which what emerges out constantly keeps relating to at a safe distance. So keeping a safe distance, it develops, but at the same time, it makes sure it does not fall back into the immensity of that oceanic experience. The second meaning of the word anchor, where what has emerged out of that matrix draws nourishment from it, takes materials from it, but maintains a safe distance after one has emerged out of it. So this is the second uh, idea about the word anchor. The third idea, which again comes from Freud, relates to the material anchor that we want to go back to by virtue of what Freud called the death instinct. The drive to merge back again into the material substratum, which is the real anchor from which we have emerged. So this is the third idea of the anchor, in the second idea of the anchor in psychoanalysis. Uh, those who go into attachment theory and most of psychoanalysis, even if they are not especially into attachment, I mean not exclusively into attachment, uh, all of them refer to the mother being the anchor in early childhood. And therefore the meaning of the word anchor also is something which always supports you and nourishes you. Anchor also refers to something which is a stabilizing effect, something which is stable. When people use the word to say that he is the anchor of my life, meaning other people keep coming in and going out, but he is always there, a stable presence. It provides a psychological continuity and thereby a psychological anchor, which provides me with safety, belongingness, and continuity. So the stabilizer, the anchor as a stabilizer. Then we have uh, anchor, which is used in the sense of foundation. That in the theory, this concept is what anchors the whole theory. Which means it provides a coherence and a foundation. Another use of the word anchor, and we see this in psychoanalysis also, that certain psychological entities provide that critical balancing act, that critical compromise, which prevents the patient from tipping over completely into pathology. To use uh, Lacan's phrase, they are hanging by the Borromean's knot, what he calls the functioning psychotics. That there is a very delicate balance and something is anchoring them so that they don't tip over into a full-blown psychosis. Then we have the philosophical aspect of the word anchor as the ground from which all emerges, which in Freudian context means at a deeper level the material substratum of the planet from which all emerges, and confined to psyche, it is the id from which all emerges. And there is a constant fear of all submerging again and getting dissolved into the id. There is always an internal terror of fusion into the id again. So this meaning of the word here, the meaning of the word anchor is in the sense of the ground from which all emerges. And another meaning of the word anchor is, from a spiritual point of view, that towards which we are moving and which is the goal where we again refuse into existence completely. So from an undivided existence, we come into existence as a divided individuality, and we remerge into that undivided existence, which is like the opposite of the infantile oceanic oneness. This is a spiritual oneness, completely opposite than the infantile oceanic oneness. So that is like the goal, and that becomes the anchor, that ceaseless, unending, all-pervading anchor. And the human mind is in such a way that we always look forward to different kind of anchors in our life, and when we find them, there is a different process inside of us, and we don't find them, there is a different process inside of us. But regardless of what is inside of us and what kind of anchor we find, the search for an anchor, and the anchor as a very important psychic entity in the dynamic functioning of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious, is a very important fact of psychic life.
Have some psychoanalytic thinkers referred to this concept?
Yes, we see the echoes of this concept without using this word that I am using. The echoes of this concept are found in Freud, Jung, and Mahler, all the three. In Freud, we find the uh, use of this concept, and this concept being implicit when Freud talks about primary narcissism, where you are the oceanic oneness and we are anchored in an unending seamless continuity, and oceanic oneness where we are anchored fully, completely. And once we emerge out of it in the object world, relational world, you always feel isolated in some sense. There is never this feeling of fullness ever again. Because the very existence of individuality outside of the oceanic experience is a divided experience of a divided entity, an isolated entity. So it is a isolation which is coterminous with our existence. And therefore, there is no solution to that isolation. Unless in a spiritual way, we reintegrate into another anchor which is above rather than below. The second reference that Freud makes is while talking about death instinct, that there is a tendency to go back to matter, the real substratum, the real anchor from which we have broken free and emerged as life and mind. And both life and mind have a tendency to go back and dissolve and reintegrate, or rather dissolve into the substratum of matter, the real anchor. So there is this call of the anchor, and there is a constant escaping this call of the anchor to maintain our sanity and maintain our life. So life and mind can exist only so long as they can resist the call of this anchor, and therefore the anchor, its characteristics and its call, and the way psyche manages to manage the call of the anchor is extremely important in psychic life. And if we cannot resist the call, then we see phenomena like self-destruction, suicide, or masochism. I'm not saying all of them happen because of only this, but one of the explanations of those phenomena can be this. So second place in psychoanalysis where you find the concept of the anchor. Jung talks about it indirectly by referring to self as something that anchors the whole psyche. The self as the coordinator of the psyche. So the self anchors the collective unconscious, the personal unconscious, the ego self axis, the adaptation to environment, and so on. So the self in the Jungian conceptualization becomes that anchor. And in a slightly more esoteric way, which Jung does not refer to, if you put the question, why is the self what it is? Then the idea that comes up is of a larger suprahuman self from which, aligned to which, or from which, or obeying which this self emerges. That which links the purpose of the individual to the purpose of existence. So the mind of existence, the self of existence, that becomes the real existential anchor of everything, every self in different human beings. So seeing the human being as a system, the self becomes an anchor. Watching the existence as a system, the self of existence becomes the anchor for all selves in the universe. So that gets into the philosophy of the Jungian metapsychology. That gets into the Jungian metapsychology, rather the philosophy metapsychology kind of combo area. And then we have references in Margaret Mahler in the separation process when the child tries to separate and again comes back to the anchor to see if the mother is there. And once he finds the anchor is there, again goes back to play. And this he repeats for a considerable period of time, after which he can go and play, knowing fully well the anchor is safe, there, predictable, stable, and available when I want. So these three places we find it very explicitly. We find very implicitly in attachment theories also, in object relations theories also. But these three are very, very explicit that without using the word anchor, they have used the concept of that word in implicit ways. And my feeling is if they had used the word anchor and theorized upon that, it would have led to much richer conceptualization.
How does this concept of anchor emerge in pathology?
You can see the involvement of this concept in a variety of pathological manifestations. When you don't have a good anchor, there is a loss of the good object. Often a variety of anxiety manifestations happen. So somebody thinks of somebody as an anchor and that person is lost. That good object is lost. The anchoring function of the good object is lost. And the fragmentation anxiety, the disintegration anxiety rises. Anxiety of uncertainty, the anxiety of survival, the anxiety of annihilation, the anxiety of object loss, all of them can rise. When a good object is lost, and a good object means many things. One of the things that a good object means is the function of the good object as an anchor. Then we have addiction, where the use of the substance provides that contraction and that coalescence, that coherence, and the solidity in the middle of the unbearable disintegration anxiety. So one group of people who are into addiction, use it primarily to overcome the disintegration anxiety, the chaos inside. Because the substance provides a pulse of pleasure, a coherence, a contraction, and an order from a completely disintegrating, chaotic, disorderly kind of flows of energies inside and the unconscious conceptualizations inside. So they find the anchor in the substance, or rather the feeling of having an anchor, something that can bring order inside with the use of the substance, and it gives you that contraction, coalescence, coherence, and the pulse of pleasure, which provides solidity at the nervous level. Then we look at depression. It's very common that one of the feelings of depression, the state of depression, is that apart from many difficult things, the good thing is that you feel grounded. And from a state of depression, when you look at the state of normalcy, you feel, many people feel, I'm not saying everyone feels, but many people feel that the state of normalcy is a state of not being grounded, and there is a particular pleasure in being grounded solidly. And therefore, when after a phase of depression, when one emerges out of it, there is a call to go back to that anchor. And one has to work hard to say goodbye to that call, which wants you to reconnect with that anchor, because that provides a very intense and solidified experience. It's a very intense experience in the nerves. Whereas the experience of freedom from depression is a very light and effervescent experience compared to the solidity of the depressive experience. So one of the things that perpetuates the depressive experience is the solidity and anchoring that it provides. And there is a peculiar pleasure of being anchored, of being fused. And when you are fused, the more solid thing that you are fused with, after fusion, the more solidity and intensity you experience, more is the pleasure and the security of that feeling fused to the anchor. So that is another manifestation of this concept. You wanted to say something?
No,
So
okay.
then we have the same idea in masochism. In masochism, there is at times there can be a experience like that of addiction, that there is a disintegration inside, and with pain, you want to bring that thing together into a contraction movement, a coherence convergence movement, which gives order, puts an end at least temporarily to that disintegration, and provides you with the solidity and safety. So the pulse of pain provides an anchoring element, an anchoring experience. So masochism in some people can be related to the loss of anchor. And masochistic act itself a search for an anchor, an experience of the anchor. Alternately, you can have completely different manifestation also of escaping deadness, escaping the anchor of deadness by a pulse of pain, which is simultaneously a pulse of pleasure. So there can be an escape from the anchor, the grounding effect, the all-consuming, or rather a fusing effect of a very solid fusing effect of the anchor. You escape from it with a pulse of pleasure, which comes with an intense spike, which comes from the masochistic act. The spike takes you out of that solid ground, that black hole kind of ground from which you require a minimum of spike to escape the gravity of that ground. So it is the gravity of that anchor which has to be escaped. And then we have uh, the loss of the anchor in mania, where the earth element is completely overtaken by the air principle, and we have this effervescence which cannot be anchored. And lastly, we can talk about histrionicity, the search for the anchor in the admiration of the other. And because there is no anchor inside, you search the anchor outside in the admiration of the other, in the acknowledgement of the other. And that you try to accomplish by an act of histrionicity. So you can see a variety of manifestations. There would be many more, but for the present discussion, we can take these few examples.
So far, we have like already discussed the importance of this concept of anchor. So the next question is that why is the anchor so important to the human mind? I mean, can you elaborate that?
Uh, if you look at the human mind, it's a very disintegrated, disorganized, disorderly, very fragmented, chaotic apparatus in terms of the events which are happening. There are biological movements, thought movements, life energy movements, emotional movements, and this disparate movements, including those created by unconscious mentality, they achieve some sort of coherence when they start uh, getting into the activity of objects. It is the objects which create this coherence in an otherwise disintegrated inside, a chaotic inside. So the coalescence and order happens when activities happen related to objects, which relates to object creation, object engagement, object destruction, and so on. Now, this object creation, whether it is created by fantasy inside or object internalization, you internalize some object from outside, all these activity, all these objects, they provide an order, a coherence, a meaningful direction, a meaning to the psychological activities inside of mind. And these objects do many things. One of the things these objects do is provide an anchor. Not all objects, some objects do. So it is very important for the human mind to find a good object inside which can provide a good anchor. So there is a natural anxiety of helplessness and dependence, which is inborn in human beings. And for that, we all require a good object to be internalized, first around us, and which has to be internalized inside for a good psychological functioning to take place. And there, the good object has to do many things, and one of the things is anchoring. Provide us a psychological anchor to whom we can always turn to, rely upon, be assured that it's always there. What we call a good, reliable, stable object. It provides a sort of an anchoring function. And if early life attachments are not good, but does not have the good anchoring function inside, and therefore whenever stress comes from outside, the disintegration happens very quickly because there is no anchor to provide you support. The soothing functions are not there because the self-security is not there. It's very difficult to keep the soothing functions going in absence of feeling secure. So the feeling of security inside comes when you have a fairly well internalized, good, reliable, stable object, and it provides a very good anchoring function. So completely unreliable parents, eruptive parents, moody parents, absent parents, emotionally absent parents, attacking parents, unstable parents, they don't provide a good anchor to be internalized. So it's very important for the human mind to create a stable attachment with a good, reliable, stable object so that one finds an anchor inside, outside, which can be internalized inside. So in the first early life attachment process, it's very important from psychoanalytic point of view for the human mind. From a philosophical standpoint, we are in search of an anchor because one belief is that our consciousness or our self has come from a ceaseless, infinite immensity from which we have shed off ourselves. Either we shed off ourselves or some force did it to it, but we do have this feeling of being shed off from a massive immensity. And that creates a loss of anchor, and always we want to re-establish the feeling which was there when we were fully anchored. So philosophically, the search for the anchor is rooted in the philosophical understanding of how we have come into existence and how existence is otherwise. And spiritually, the concept is important because the goal is to reintegrate or re-experience oneness with that infinite anchor. So spiritually, it is the goal of re-experiencing that integration. And this is completely different from the early life oceanic experience. It may share some commonalities with the oceanic experience, but it's a completely different level of development and psychic organization. So it's very important from all the uh, 10 points, psychoanalytic, philosophical, and spiritual. And we can see that practically also, individuals who did not have a good anchoring experience in real life or who could not internalize it, we can see the easy disintegration, the easy development of anxiety, inability to take on intense challenges, avoidance of difficult situations, low levels of resilience, easy predisposition to difficulties and pathologies. So we do see manifestations in practical life also.
It's very surprising. I mean, if this idea of anchor is so important for the well-being of human being, then why has no really a good discourse taken place around this concept?
One reason is because no one after Freud really got interested in the area of uh, death instinct as much as Freud was. Right? Klein was interested to some extent, but uh, she was more interested in using the concept rather than in developing the concept. So after Freud, nobody went into that kind of theorizing, either in the anchor below, which was the material ground where death instinct is supposed to take us, or at least the call is there, or uh, those who went into hallucinogenic or parapsychological or spiritual side, the experience of being anchored above into a oneness. So they could not do much in psychoanalysis because there was no way psychoanalysis could accommodate them. So they also, who talked about anchor the spiritual sense, they could not get into psychoanalysis. The third element is, if you look into the concept of anchors, we find three different types of categories of anchors. The anchor below, the anchoring element of the death instinct. The anchor above, the anchoring element and the oneness element of the spiritual type. And anchors in between, the anchors that we want in everyday life. So in any given situation, if you are working in an organization and somebody is supporting you like a solid rock, he is your anchor in the organization. And if he leaves and goes to work somewhere else, you feel yourself insecure, disintegrated, unprotected because the anchor in the organization is lost. It's a very normal example of anchoring. So we have the idea of the spiritual anchor the Freudian psychoanalytic anchor, the two concepts of oceanic experience and the death instinct, and anchors in everyday life. So I think it is more a question of lack of theoretical interest, lack of being able to identify this fact, the significance of this concept. Uh, that is more at the root of it, why it has not developed so much. The second element is it's easy to conceptualize anchors in everyday life, but it's very difficult to conceptualize the or develop the concept of anchor in terms of the oceanic oneness, or anchor in terms of death instinct, or anchor in terms of the spiritual anchor, because they require very deep explorations, and unless you have some partial experiential uh, dive, and if not experiential, at least a very deep intuitive understanding, just two steps short of experiential understanding, you cannot really develop those concepts. One of the tragedies has been that we don't have good system builders in psychoanalysis after Freud and Jung. So we have more of process-oriented innovators, process-oriented geniuses, but not philosophical system builders. And that's one of the one of the problems why fundamental concepts like model of the mind, fundamental concepts like life and death instinct, fundamental concepts like annihilation and effervescence, these don't get conceptualized beyond a particular point.
You just mentioned about two concepts of, I mean, three concepts, but two, like one is the spiritual anchor and the other is the earthly anchor concept. So how do we explore these two anchors?
Uh, the spiritual concept has to be explored by a spiritual exploration. So unless we get into those experiences, we cannot know. Now there are two ways of exploring it theoretically. One, best is we should have the experience and then theorize. Two, if we cannot have the experience of the spiritual anchor, it may be a it is a rare experience. Then we have to sit and talk with those who are psychologically minded and who have this experience. And fortunately, we still have people alive in this world who are open to research, open to psychology, and also have this experience. So we should go to them and discuss with them about the anchor above, the spiritual anchor. With respect to the anchor below, the anchor of the death instinct, the material ground, that exploration has to be done partly intuitively and partly experientially by delving into the center of inertia inside of us. And there are two accomplishments here of somebody else that we can profit from. And Sri Aurobindo and Mother, both of them have gone deep into it. And they had two important experiences which are important in this context. One, the intuitive or experience, intuitive and partly experiential experience of something that is purely physical. Say a rock. Sri Aurobindo talks about the basalt rock. A very luminous visualization and an intuitive understanding of what it is to be a basalt rock, the inertia there. So first is the intuitive experience of being a basalt rock, and second is experience of the core inertia, which is everywhere, including the basalt rock and everywhere else. It is like the inertia of the inert, the center of the core, kind of. The essential inertia which informs all that we think is fully inert. Because their argument, their belief is, their finding is that what we think to be inert is also very dynamic. And if you go into the inertness of the inert, then you really experience the real inertness. And that is where you really experience the full force of the anchoring function. The essence of what is in Ayurveda we would call the earth element, the essence of earth element. In the Panch Mahabhut sense, the essence of that earth element. So that is second. And the third is with regard to uh, the oceanic experience. Uh, those who have some sort of a narcissistic orientation, or at times in psychosis, or at times just one has a rare experience, maybe hallucinogenic or maybe natural, or at times one gets it in holotropic breathing. But these are the portals or the options through which one can experience the oceanic oneness, which may not be of the spiritual height, which may have elements of early life oceanic experience, but people do report those kind of experiences. With regard to the anchoring element in everyday life, one just has to be aware and purposeful to find them, and we can find them in everyday life, in offices, at homes, in friend circles, in a person who is alone, in a person who has just lost somebody. We can easily find the workings of the anchoring function in everyday life. So these are the ways we can explore these anchors.
We come to our last question. Does holistic healing or spirituality talk about this concept of anchor?
Without using the word yes, in spirituality, uh, the good, reliable, stable object is the God and the Guru and many other tools which are used. And one of the functions that these elements do inside the mind is provide an anchoring function, an ordering function, it being giving some sort of ego strength and also some sort of order in that chaos inside. And one of the important elements of that is a certainty. Certainty is very important in the anchoring conceptualization. When we are certain about something, it's easy to experience that or accept that as an anchor and be protected by that. So the anchor may be all good anchor, a half good anchor, a quarter good anchor, but whatever goodness is there in the anchor, the certainty about that is very important. A less good object is far better than an unpredictable object, because then one knows how to cope up and one designs one life according to it, which is much smoother compared to living with somebody where everything is uncertain and unstable. So the God, the Guru, the book, some of the tools, idols, with stories related to idols, creating the full personality of the idol, and many other tools are used in spirituality to provide the good, reliable, stable object inside. And one of the things it does is provide an anchoring function and brings about stability, peace, and order in an otherwise chaotic inside. The second element that goes in spirituality is this whole ontological concept of the anchor. The anchor as the goal, that there is a world somewhere, a world of light, a world of happiness, where all is good and you will reconnect to it in some time. So there is a ontological seeking of an all good object which will provide all perfect things, one of which will be the function of the perfect anchor.
How about other things like, I mean, when we talk of holistic healing, like yoga or pranic healing, Reiki, how is this concept touched upon in these systems?
Again, they also use the concept of God, the concept of Guru, whoever has created that particular theory. The Guru also becomes omnipotent object. He is also internalized and he also provides an anchoring function. Reiki particularly uses yantras and mantras. So together, the yantra mantra, according to a particular tantra, when it is used, that creates a powerful entity, allows energy to flow into us and heal us or give us what we want to whatever extent it can. And that combination of the God, Guru, and the yantra mantra tantra of Reiki becomes like an all good object, or rather a collection of many good objects. And these are internalized and they provide the anchoring function. So that is in Reiki. In Pranic healing, again, we have the same thing. We don't use the yantra and mantra, but we use different colors of energies, of different colored energies. We use crystals. We use the grace of Guru, the grace of higher beings. So in Pranic healing, also the idea of God, the idea of the Mahaguruji Mailing and Master Chuakok Sui, and then the power of the healing energies, the power of crystals, the power of higher beings, all of that provides us an opportunity to internalize many good objects which do many things in us, including providing us a good anchor. Or rather, many good anchors, I would say, which the psyche must be using either differently in different contexts, or if need be, maybe even putting them together to create a one good anchor. We really have to explore the dynamics of how the anchoring function works.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vaidya. This was truly a very enriching discussion and a very new exploratory discussion about this very good topic. And do write to us at hvindia@gmail.com. Namaste.
Namaste.